being here, Minister. We're delighted that you've come to talk about what is, I think, a very, very important subject. And I suppose the first question is to ask whether discipline in schools does need improving. You know, is there a problem? Because I've no doubt that in many schools across the country, actually, it's not a problem. You know, there are thousands of teachers and thousands of schools where actually they manage school classrooms very, very well indeed. But similarly, there are many schools where there have been behaviour problems in the past, and some of them have turned round. So it proves that, you know, poor behaviour can be improved, and the school community and the ethos and the atmosphere and culture of the school can be changed. But I also am clear from the results of this survey that it is a big issue, behaviour, for many, many teachers. And so clearly we do have to take account of what teachers are saying. And over the past few weeks, ourselves, Parentline Plus, the National Union of Teachers, have been talking to teachers in schools and FE colleges to ask what they think about behaviour. And if it's okay, I'm just going to ask you for a little bit of audience participation. Won't be too hard, I promise, just to check that everyone's awake. So you've all got cards in front of you, I believe, and some of you will have them on your lines on poor behaviour that you referred to them a minute ago. If you've got a red mark on the back of it, could you hold the card up? Okay, excellent. Well, you represent, by holding those cards up, the proportion of teachers who responded to the survey. 92% who said behaviour had got worse over the course of their career. Okay, so thanks very much for that. Half of the respondents said they were deliberately distracted verbally to disrupt teaching and learning on a daily basis. And they reported less frequent but high-level behavioural problems: theft, vandalism, abusive comments, assault, and sometimes formal false allegations. And it was interesting to note there was some press, I think, at the weekend about the fact that teachers might get anonymity in the future if they're accused of an allegation against a child. And that's something that actually I think we would warmly welcome because it can be something that destroys careers for teachers. And I certainly know that that's of great interest to us. So overall, poor behaviour seems to have an undeniably damaging effect and impact on teachers, and inevitably that has an impact on those they teach and educational outcomes. 81% of those surveys said they've experienced stress, anxiety or depression due to poor behaviour. That's quite significant. And sadly, 79% of those that answered the survey felt unable to teach effectively as a result. And perhaps even worse than that, many children are in danger of losing teachers, because 70% of them who responded said that because of poor behaviour they considered actually leaving the profession. So if we think about what it costs to train teachers, we think about the investment individuals put in to that kind of career choice, there's a huge financial and emotional cost, and there's an impact to education in this country by the potential loss of teachers at a time when actually I think we need to be thinking about encouraging people to go into teaching and to want to train to what is one of the key professions that is a key pillar in building our communities and a strong society. So in light of these findings, it's hard to doubt that there is a problem. So I suppose the question next is, what are we going to do about it? And I'd like to put forward a solution shortly, but first I'd like to show you a short film just to illustrate some of the points. Thanks very much for paying attention to that. It's pretty clear from the interviews there that there's a difference of opinion between pupils, parents and teachers, and perhaps that's something that, you know, needs to be talked about and maybe needs to change if behaviour is to improve. Obviously we can't pretend that one film of one teacher, a parent and two pupils represent the relationship between all teachers, parents and pupils, but it does, I think, hint at the difficulty in ensuring a very consistent, effective approach to behaviour at home and school. I know as a parent myself that with my 3 sons, and there's 18 months between my twin sons and my eldest, that going through school, the trick was, we gradually learnt as parents, was that actually working with the staff, working with teachers in schools, and I had a time when my 3 kids were in 3 different schools, and it was interesting to note how the cultures were different. But the one thing that was common was that when we got to know the staff and the staff got to know us, and we actually worked together, if there were problems at any point, and inevitably on the journey of most kids there are going to be ups and downs, we were able to actually have a dialogue rather than feel that it was them and us, which I know at the beginning it often felt like with their school lives. Certainly post-primary, the primary teachers have more engagement with parents generally. At secondary, it changes quite a bit. So the vast majority of school community members are all well-intentioned, parents, teachers, and possibly the pupils want to go in and do well. But clearly not everybody sings from the same song sheet. And if we want behaviour to improve, we have to find ways to join up and get people to work together. So we need to build a coalition, and as Nick knows, you've got strong support for coalitions recently, so we hope that you can support this kind of coalition between parents, teachers and pupils. And could I ask you once again to hold up cards that you've been given, whether there's a red mark or not, whatever your card is, can you just hold them all up? So together, that represents the proportion of teachers, 97% who took part in our survey, and said that consistent discipline and motivation by a pupil's parent or carer and school staff was essential or important for improving behaviour in the future. So that's the last arm exercise of the morning for you. When we asked the teachers to vote on possible solutions, they answered strongly in favour of actions that would help school and home to work closely together. I suppose much in the way that I've described in my own personal experience, this seems to be the common theme. There seems to be sometimes a disconnection between schools and parents. Now, whether that's, we could say that those parents are less interested in their kids, I don't know whether that's the case. I certainly know Jeremy will have interesting things to say about parents' experiences of being at school and how it shapes their reaction to their own children's experience when they go to school. Many people who responded said it would be essential to regularly review school policy, behaviour policy together and involve everyone in that process. And they also favoured actions such as training for teachers on challenging behaviour. It was interesting that many of the respondents said that they hadn't received in the past 2 years sufficient training on how to manage poor behaviour, and more guidance for parents on school behaviour policies. Now, I know in the past there have been policies introduced where schools issue instructions, if you like, to parents that they sign up to, and that's commonly the case still at secondary and FE. I don't know whether it's the case in primary still. But I certainly know from my own experience, often you get those things at the beginning and you never see or hear of them again. And I think that's what teachers are saying. They've had policy initiatives in the past where something's introduced and then it's never followed through. But such policies surely couldn't be that difficult to introduce and don't require a great deal of cost. But the gains could be enormous. If we can counteract the causes of stymied performance, of sickness absence amongst teachers, which is much higher than the average sickness for other professions, and the resignations of some of the great teachers that we've got in the country, then hundreds of millions of pounds could be saved. Relations between school and the home could be clearer, and if not repaired, and the behaviour and the education and future of millions of pupils will be enhanced and reformed and improved. So all of the results, the video that we showed you and the forum online are all available to be looked at on our website, and we're delighted that we've had the involvement of the Minister, the NUT, Parentline Plus and now for Children. But for change to work, we always have to reach every school in the community. Everybody has to come on board. So if you could start by getting involved and filling in your comments on the cards we've given you this morning, that would be useful to collate those, and we'll collect those at the end. I'm passionate about the work we do to help teachers, and I know that this can be a very difficult and divisive issue, but it's one that we can resolve and should resolve. And we can't afford to compromise on behaviour. The impact on teachers is huge, the impact on pupils is huge, and communities, as we said. Parents, teachers, pupils, policy makers, we have to build a coalition to create safe, respectful school communities where teachers, and by extension those children that they teach, can fulfil their potential. Thanks very much.